What is going on, all you profitable stylists out there, all you future profitable stylists out there? We are talking hair extension placements. What are the secrets of all the pros? What do we do behind the chair that makes it so different than everybody else? Bernard looks a little different. He let his beard grow in this week, and he's wearing his glasses. Now we got RJ with us this week, so RJ, it's always a treat to have you when you're available. You're not always available every week. You're usually behind the scenes. Good morning.
Good morning. So before you get into the actual placement secrets, I'll throw my 2 cents in the mix, which is how important placement is. So often I see things on YouTube, Facebook, hair extension disaster videos, and most people say they were cut improperly. My take is there's a step before cutting and blending, and that's placement. I've seen placement solve 90% of blending issues. So this is an extremely important topic, and a lot of people don't even know the difference between placement and patterns.
It's so true. But a pattern is the positioning of how the extensions go in. Placement is where you're actually putting them in to install them. They may sound similar, but they could not be more different than each other. Even though you're planning on putting your extensions right here, let's just say, for example, I want to put my extensions right here in a row. That's my pattern. When I actually start physically putting them in, that's my placement. And how that differs is this. I may want to put my hair extensions here in this pattern, but when I actually get to this section, what if that hair is too fine? What if the hair is too thin? What if it's too sparse? What if, the client doesn't have enough density? What if there was a mishap and she's got breakage right there? What if her hair is not a solid color? It's highlighted and low lighted. And if I just happen to grab that specific piece in that section, it's a lighter piece. Then when I go to put my hair extension, it's going to be too much contrast. It's not going to blend nicely. That's placement. Okay. What if I'm standing sideways? What if I'm not center with the section that I'm applying? Now I've over directed that install, that bond install, or that weft, or the bead, the O-ring, any kind of even tapes. I know we don't cover tapes too much, but even the tapes, in all fairness, any extension you put in, so that all is placement, and placement is so vital, so vital in addition to the pattern. I think placement is more important than the pattern itself in most cases. I agree with you. With that said, everybody goes with standard placement. They go below. They try to start from the bottom. They try to get as low to the nape as possible or as close to the hairline as possible. And because everybody's doing that, they're getting length. Yeah, sure, you're always going to get length. But then this is how you always end up with those mullets, because you got all the hair down here on the bottom. You don't have enough hair up in the crown. All of a sudden, your natural hair is only falling here or here. The rest of your extensions is down here. Now you have this huge disconnect. And then what are your choices? You got to go in and you got to slide cut, or you got to razor cut to try to blend from here to there. Well, by the time you're debulking, you're removing so much mass from the hair extensions themselves. They look thin and straggly on the bottom. That's why everybody's got like what they refer to. Have you heard of spaghetti hair? Have you heard of it called like that, spaghetti hair?
Yeah. Yep.
That's the biggest problem. That is the biggest problem. How many phone calls do you get from an account that said, hey, I just ordered X amount of hair, but it wasn't enough? Like how fast can you get me more hair?
Yeah, that's very common. They trying to cut costs in the beginning. And I agree with you. The biggest placement issue is putting them too low, because because people only typically think of extensions for length, and they always chasing that length. So if you put them a little too low, we get an extra 4 inches, but it looks terrible. You know, you get that shelf, that disconnect, like you said, it looks ridiculous. And the second thing with that is not using enough hair. So if they don't purchase enough hair, they put it all low to get that length, and it makes it almost impossible for it to look natural.
Another thing, as you were saying that, you made me think of this too. Also with the placement, they'll put the one there, like they'll put one down and they won't put another one right next to it. They'll kind of leave a little space in between. And then they start, the more space you leave in between up on top of the head, by the time that falls down, you got to think about how that's going to spread across the body as well too.
Right.
And especially when you're creating length, that really shows off the sparseness. And especially if you don't get enough hair, if you're trying to cut corners for budget reason, for time, for whatever the reason is, if you don't put the hair close enough, you are creating a weight line that doesn't exist. You are creating additional length that isn't already there. It is so vital to be placing those hair extensions side by side by side by side, because then by the time they fall down and they spread across, you have to create that coverage. Otherwise, that's another reason why it's going to look very sparse. And then you go in and you further layer through that, you're just further thinning out that area, that section even more. So when we're talking about going higher, going in the crown, not going high enough.
Well, really quick, that checkerboard or bricklaying pattern that you're mentioning, it is a legitimate strategy, but only if your client has thin or fine hair. If your client has really thick hair, it's going to be really hard to checkerboard bonds and make it look good at the bottom. People think my client has a lot of hair, so I don't need as many extensions. It's the opposite. If your client has thin hair, you don't need as many extensions. When your client has thick hair, you need more extensions to make it look believable.
The ponytail test is the most important test to know how to do for a client when you're doing hair extensions. There is nothing worse than having a client with thin, fine hair. She doesn't have a lot of hair. And then you're like, oh, like you just said, because she's so thin, I'm going to load this head up. I'm going to put 100, 150 strands in here. I'm going to put in 2 wefts, 3 wefts. We're really going to load this sucker up, right? Now, you go to pull all this hair back in a ponytail. It looks like nothing on the head. And then all of a sudden you have this big, fat horsetail coming off the back of her head. She's got, flat to the head because her natural hair is fine. And then on the bottom, all of a sudden you have this lion's mane of hair. There's nothing worse than that look. Right. Equally so for the clients with the thicker hair, the coarser hair. They got greedy at the buffet when they were passing hair out. They went for seconds and thirds. They got hair for 2-3 people. You're gonna make them look like an octopus with all the little tentacles, like a calamari. They got this big.
If you don't use enough, right?
If you don't use enough hair, you got like this big volume on the top of their head, and then you got all these little tentacles sticking down.
Right, and the other placement issue, are you going to talk about how people too often stack wefts too low instead of spreading them out? So to recap on that ponytail test, if you pull all your client's hair back into a ponytail, you should physically feel the thickness of their natural hair with the extensions just put straight to their scalp, right? That's that fresh install. So that should be nice and thick. As you start walking your hand down that ponytail, you should feel the transition very natural go from really thick, because you have both the client's natural hair and the extension hair in there. And then as you're walking it down that ponytail,
you should naturally feel a very soft, even, consistent transition from super thick to thinner, because now, as you get halfway down the ponytail, the natural hair isn't there anymore.
Right.
Now it's only the length of the hair extensions.
Right.
If you go from
You don't
super
have
thick,
that disconnect.
yeah, you got to connect your hands going down the
There.
ponytail.
Right.
If you get halfway down and all of a sudden you go from thick to all of a sudden nothing, you don't have enough hair. You do not have enough hair at all. So yeah, that's where you need either, you either need thicker density or you need more hair. So that's the ponytail test. As far as the placement strategies go, the pattern, like you just mentioned, is I have a weft. I'm going to try to follow the largest area of the head, which is right across the middle of the occipital bone, that bone in the back of your head. And you're going to come across right over your ears, right around your temples, and you're going to try to come as forward as possible, because that is the widest area of everybody's head, regardless of how big or small your head is. That is the widest part of everybody's head. So that is the common placement pattern, to go from the middle of that bone on the back of your head and come all the way around the front, staying in line with your temples. Okay. The problem with the placement with that is they'll get that first weft in there, and that'll be good. Now they want more volume, or they want more thickness. They got that second weft. In some techniques, they do not have the option to be able to cut their weft, because the whole thing will fall apart. They're just not made for that. For example, the Onstage brand of weft extensions, that is one of their finest features amongst multiple other features. But one of the key features is the fact that they are fully customizable. You can cut that weft in half, in thirds, in fourths, and whatever you need to do. You could cut them down to be the same size of a tape if you need to. If you're going to be diligent enough, you can cut them into strands if you want to. Point is, if you don't have the ability to customize your weft, one of the mistakes that happens is they'll put that first weft in, and without leaving any room in between, they'll go in and they'll layer the second one right underneath the first one. Right. It makes that section right there, it makes that area so much fatter, so much thicker. It almost feels like a speed bump on the head. The other problem is, we focus so much on our placement and getting our placement just right, we forget that wherever you put the hair up here, down here is going to be affected of how it lays.
Right.
And one of the common problems is the natural hair of the client at their nape only falls to about their shoulder or their collarbone, generally speaking. And then you've put the hair extensions up here high, they're falling down here. Now, when the client is wearing her hair, you see all these little short, loose, weird hairs that are sticking out. And the client is always freaking out about those, right? Well, that's not the hair extensions. That's the client's natural hair. It's just so disconnected because there isn't no transition. You need to put the hair evenly. It's got to be placed at the nape or as close to the nape as possible. You still got to leave enough hair around the hairline to cover it up. And even when a client says, I always wear my hair down, I never pull my hair up. Yeah, that may be accurate until you load her hair up with twice the amount of hair. When you have twice the amount of hair, you're just going to feel heavier. It's going to feel hotter. So she's going to start pulling her hair back to get it off of her, Right. I mean, down by where you are in New Orleans, in the summertime, you know how hot it gets down there by you, right?
Yeah, it's the humidity that if it's 90 degrees, it feels like 114. So
I can only imagine women are pulling their hair back or pulling it up or pulling it down in a ponytail most of the time.
Yep. So the placement, you had mentioned the wefts that you can't cut the width of them without them unraveling. Have you seen the fold over? So people will start here, they'll go all the way around, they'll get here and they got a couple inches left, so they fold it. So if you're installing a weft that can't be cut, center it and work from the middle out in the mid. That way, when you fold in it, it's the same on both sides. You
Yeah.
don't want to have the fold on one side. That's an extremely common mistake. But let's talk about, forget about fine hair, thick hair. Let's talk about the average person.
Mm-hmm.
One of Bernard's favorite things is for a full head is 2 wefts and a pack of strands. So let's talk about the average head. What do you think the ideal placement for those 2 wefts and a pack of strands are?
I'll tell you this way. 2 wefts and a pack of strands is awesome because a pack of strands comes in an increment of 25 pieces. And that's going to be really important for later. Let's talk about the wefts first.
Right.
Because the wefts generally are going to go on the back of the head. They're going to come forward. So that's going to give you a lot of coverage. It's going to allow the strands to customize and complete the look. So we're going to put the strands aside for a sec. The first weft should be the length. The second weft then allows you to get your volume and to fill in your gap, whatever you have left. Personally, I love taking one weft and using it as a full piece and taking my second weft and cutting it into two, like into half. Generally speaking, I try to cut it in half.
So roughly 6 inches.
Roughly 6 inches. But yeah, because a standard weft comes 12 inches wide. By cutting that weft in half into 6 inches, it fits more comfortably in the back of the head. Now you have 2 pieces. The second piece, if you try to put that lower, it's generally still not going to fit. So you even have to further cut that too. Okay.
Depending on how
so even if you cut that in half, you can cut that into a 3-inch segment.
Right.
So now you have your one weft has now been cut in half. You have 1/2 is going to go into the head. That's going to go, if you feel the back of your head, if you go below
props here, you keep going.
Yeah. If you feel the back of your head and you go below that bone, that occipital bone back there, and when you come across, that's basically you're aligned somewhere around the middle of your ear. Okay. That's underneath your occipital bone. If you need to adjust slightly higher than that to make that 6-inch half weft fit, you need to adjust that placement. However, you need to adjust that placement to get that to fit comfortably. So this way, you're not all the way to the hairline. You want to leave a little bit space away from the hairline. That's your first placement. Now you have 1/2 of that same weft that you just cut. You have half of that left over. You're going to go a little bit lower underneath that to the nape. You're going to have to cut. Yeah. So see that 6-inch right there? That's perfect. You know, that blue line right there, whether that's going to go right above the ear and go underneath that bone, or whether you keep it in line with the middle of the ear towards the top of the ear, that's where that 6-inch weft can go. And it's a beautiful, beautiful placement spot. Bring that head back up, RJ.
So on this one, he has 1 weft, 2 packs of strands. I was looking for the 2 wefts, 1 pack of strands mannequin, but I don't see it.
Yeah.
Because typically he'll put a weft also here.
Right in there. So
and then less strands.
Yeah, less strands on the sides. So underneath that first 6-inch, you put in your second 6-inch underneath that. This is what I'm saying. It might be too wide for that section. You may have to cut that in half. Now you got a 3-inch.
Right.
So you put that right in there like that, real nice and small.
Right. And when you stack them like this, all of that, like you said, is happening down here. So you don't get that shelf.
You got the length from the nape coming all the way down. And it's gonna better hide the corners of the natural hair, because it's gonna direct that natural hair to stay laying back down flat. It's not gonna be poking out as much. That second 6-inch that goes across through the middle is gonna bridge the gap so you don't have this weird disconnect. It's gonna give you a nice layering effect. So that's gonna lay down. it's going to further push down any natural hairs they're going to try to want to poke out. Okay. So that's going to be really nice too. You have left over a 3-inch second segment. You can put that in between to fill that space if you want to fill in more hair. You could put that above if you want to, or you could just leave it out and use it for later for that client when she comes back in the future, or you could use it on somebody else. So that's your first weft. Your second weft, the full 12-inch, can go right above that in the crown area. But you have to be mindful to stay underneath the natural swirl. That natural swirl is your cowlick. You can't fight that. Even if the client says they're going to comb their hair back fully, you can't control it. The hair is going to move. You're going to see that. So you got to stay underneath your natural swirl as high up on the crown as possible, and then you come forward. And centering yourself from the middle and coming forward, that's what's going to keep you even on both sides. So you make sure you fit.
Depending on where they part their hair.
So if you have a center part, you're going to stay even. If you have a side part.
This is the part.
Mm-hmm.
So you can follow what Bernard did with this weft. Instead of going straight across, he came up.
Yeah.
Because you can see where the part is. If they part the hair on the side and you just go straight across, you're going to have problems underneath. Now this blue one follows the pattern of the orange one. The blue one is also not straight across. So you have to be aware. I'm talking about
for a center part. For the side part, yes. For the side part, you start a little lower on the weak side. So like I part my hair like this, right? So on this side, my weaker side, I'm going to start a little bit lower.
And then
as I'm coming around, I'm going to start curving upwards.
Exactly.
Because if I place this evenly on both sides, I have so much extra hair coming this way. Again, it's going to create a disconnect. It's going to create a weight line. And you're going to see the discrepancy. You're going to see the unevenness between where my natural hair falls and where the hair extension falls.
Yep.
And
that's where placement is more important than cutting.
So much more.
You have to be aware of where that part is.
Proper placement can actually, if you do proper placement, sometimes you don't even have to cut the hair at all to blend it at the end.
Before we cut, I'm like, that already looks great.
Yeah. Yeah. And now we got a comment. It says, I think most go low because they think the attachment is going to be seen. And this goes back to what I was talking about. The higher up in the crown you go, you do have to be mindful of the cowlick. But if you stay below the cowlick, if you stay about 2-3 fingers below the cowlick, or if you kind of pin the hair in with a clip and then lay the hair over it and start shaking the hair around, or make the client shake their head to see how their hair shifts, if you got enough hair covering that up, that's what you want. That is so vital.
You can use the silver rat tail comb trick. If you slide that in to where you can't see the rat tail comb, you won't be able to see the extensions.
Is very true, because the contrast from the comb is going to show through regardless of if they have lighter color hair, darker color hair.
Bright silver. If you can't see that, you definitely can't see.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to see the extensions. So it's very, very true.
So 2 wefts and a pack of strands. Why the pack of strands?
So now you've got your 2 wefts in.
Right.
On the sides, because we cut 1 weft in half, it didn't reach past the ears. It stayed in the back of the head up to the ears. The second weft, a full weft, may come across. Okay. You still have a gap. And a lot of women do face framing. They style their hair purposefully in angles, so it's stepped and layered to frame their face. Not everybody just has one straight, hair coming down. Some women even wear bangs, whether it's a side bang, a curtain bang, a straight bang across, the Cleopatra bangs, the nice short ones, and then it comes down, and then they further layer to frame their whole face up, right? And it's a beautiful look. It's a very, very fashionable, beautiful look. The issue, what happens is the more, now if you wear bangs, there's less hair here. And if you go and further frame this up, it's even further less hair here. So once you get past the chin, all of a sudden there's this disconnect. The natural length is down here, or the extension length is even further down here, but the hair in the front is up to here. So you have like this really short, and then all of a sudden you have this really long. So this is where the strands come in. You start putting those strands on an angle, or you start filling in right above the ear. You do it creatively and purposefully in such a way that you're filling in more volume and more fullness. That corner that gets cut right above the sideburn, right where your sideburn is. And on women, they don't really have a sideburn. So that's why they take the whole front section and they just kind of connect everything together. But that section of hair where the sideburn would be is such an important, vital corner that connects the style from the front of the head to the length in the back of the head. And because generally speaking, that gets cut and blended into the front, that's why there's such a huge disconnect. So by purposefully putting in a couple of strands, you can really fill in that corner to connect the front to the back and make that transition of length look so much more natural. You can further put in another row of strands. So you could put that one above the ear. You could put another row a little bit further up wherever you have room, and you can put in that second row of strands, and you can really fill in that face framing so they can really get that nice, beautiful, if they wear like a side bang, it's so important to have that hair show through so you can connect. There's nothing worse than seeing that side bang come across and then it's just coming across into nothingness. You need to have some volume and some thickness down here coming forward so it really enhances the style of that side bang. Even if you're wearing straight bangs across, it's even more vital to show off those bangs to have even hair on both sides. So with a pack of 25, you put in a row of 5. You put in a second row of 5. That's 10 pieces. You do the same thing on the opposite side. There goes another 10 pieces. That's already 20 pieces. You still have 5 pieces left over. Now, I'll use myself again. I have my side part, right? My 2 rows will be a little bit closer to each other. But on my opposite side, they'll be a little bit further away from each other. But even with them being further away, I still have all this hair coming over. And if I got that weft in there, it still might be too much hair coming over, right? This is where those last 5 pieces are vital. I can line up with the arch of my eyebrow, the center of my eyebrow. I can draw an imaginary line straight up, and I can put them that high up over the top of my head, over the weft. So now I got strands under the weft. I got the weft where it comes forward, and then I got a couple of strands over that weft.
Right.
And that just completes the look. It just completely connects everything and completes the look. Especially if you have the side bang.
If your side part is that far over, you can probably get away with 1 row. It's all going to
depending on the density of the client.
But so, in your opinion, the sides, it's much better to have strands, whether they K-tip, I-tip, O-tip. Strands on the sides are always going to beat wefts and tapes. Is that what you're saying?
I'm very vocal about strands. I am a big, huge fan of stranded hair, and it's specifically for that reason, like you're mentioning. The front of the hair is always in movement. That is the first place everybody sees. That is the first thing everybody is touching, constantly tucking the hair behind the ear, braiding, detailing, piecing, spraying, well, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, okay? The front of the hair is always being styled the most. The thing what happens with that is when you have a weft or a tape, you have a segment of hair. That is a big chunk that's falling all down together. It is, I'm not saying it's not possible to do it. All I'm saying is it's more difficult. to get movement, natural movement and flow in that chunk of hair,
Right.
in that segment of hair. When you're putting in strands, because they're individual pieces, yes, you're placing them close to each other to create a segment of hair, but they're still individual pieces. They're going to have individual movement and freedom. So it's just going to mimic natural hair much more closely and much more naturally in that way. That's the power of putting strands in, especially in the front. Also, clients are always messing around with the front more than they are with the back.
That's what they see.
Because that's what they see.
Yeah.
So they're always styling it, and they're always goofing around, and they're always messing around. They're constantly touching it more. So the hair in the back, because they can't reach it as easily, they don't see it as often, they don't play with that as much. They're always wanting to make adjustments in the front. Like it is not uncommon to have a client come in, get the fronts moved up sooner, and leave the back alone and let that grow out further. And it's kind of like leapfrogging the appointment. And then they'll come in, and then the second time, they'll get the fronts moved up again, and then they'll get the back moved up again. They'll come back and get the fronts moved up, leave the back alone. That's not uncommon. We see that often. The other thing we see is clients are always changing out the hair in the front way more often than they're changing out the hair in the back. It's not because the life cycle of the hair doesn't last. It's because the client just always wants more hair, fresh hair, new hair. So having to do that with a weft is not cost efficient. It's not style efficient. It's more efficient to do it with a pack of strands, with individual strands. Whether, like you said, they're the O-tip, the K-tip, the keratin bonds, whatever, individual strands you're using, it's always going to be easier to do it with strands than you are going to be doing it with a tape or a weft.
Right.
That's for sure. The other thing is you got to look at placement. Why placement is vital is from a comfort perspective. And that comfort perspective is twofold. It's the comfort of the client being able to style their hair and being able to wear their hair. I believe those are two different things, because wearing the hair means, are they going to be able to lay down comfortably? Are they going to be able to feel confident, or are they going to be self-conscious about where the hair is showing? There is nothing worse than sitting with somebody, especially if you're sitting across from like you're on a date with a woman, right? As a guy, I'm sitting across from a woman, and she's constantly doing this. I've been on a lot of dates where I've seen that. The girl went and got her hair done. She's trying to look good, and now she's self-conscious about it because for whatever reason, wherever the hair extensions were put, they're not laying where she wants them to lay, where she feels good about however she did her outfit. And that really matters, because if you're wearing a high top, then it doesn't necessarily matter how the hair is falling as much in comparison to when you're wearing a tank top, a spaghetti string strap dress, or a halter top or a tube top where you have nothing. Oh my God, does the placement matter so much more? Because in essence, even though they're bare chest and bare shoulder, a woman still wants to have something there. Just as what do you call that? Like a comfort, a safety comfort, a safety net thing, So they have those shawls that they put over. Well, the hair naturally becomes like that shawl. And that's where the placement becomes so vital too. If the hair is not laying right and it's not framing the body to show off the bosom or to show off the shoulder nicely, they're going to be self-conscious about it. So that's another thing about the wear. Sleeping, I kind of glazed over it, but since I'm going into the more details, sleeping is vital too. If it is uncomfortable for them to be laying down on their head, wherever the hair extensions are placed, they're going to be tossing and turning. That's going to create more friction, which is going to create more tangling. And how many phone calls do we get? The hair is ratted up in a ball. I must have got a bad batch. It's like you're playing rugby in your sleep, man. That's why you got a softball. That's why you got a golf ball on the side of your head.
So, so far, the two biggest placement mistakes are not going high enough and not putting enough hair on the sides. What's the third biggest placement mistake that you see?
The angles for styling. So now I'll talk about styling. Okay. With your styling options, you can try to wear it straight down to get the most maximum volume, fullness, and thickness. So then it would make sense to put your row straight across, because then that hair naturally is going to fall straight down. It makes sense on paper and it makes sense in theory. Here is the problem. Nobody has a square block head. Okay. Unless you're a Marine, then you're called like a meathead or a blockhead.
Uh-oh.
And I salute you. But the majority, 99% of people out there have a round head to some effect. And Bernard and I did a video a couple of weeks ago about face shapes: heart shape, oval shape, egg shape, a round.
Yep, there were no square shapes.
There was no square shapes. Everybody's got a rounded head. So if you go in and you put in such perfectly straight, blocky rows, due to the curvature of the head, it's going to throw off that angle. So now, if I come straight across over here like this, my cheekbone is going to slightly push that hair up, and then it's going to curve it in because my face comes down. This hair, this first hair here, is going to fall slightly shorter than the next hair that's going to come down my sideburn, because my sideburn is a little more flatter on my face. Now this hair is going to look slightly longer. Then the next hair next to it is going to hit the top of my ear, and it's going to bounce up, and then it's going to fall down. So now that hair is going to look slightly shorter. So now I got a shorter hair, a longer hair, and a shorter hair again. I'm starting to look, and then the hair behind that's going to fall behind my ear. But because of the round of my hairline and my neck, some people have a long giraffe neck. Some people have a turtleneck. They have no neck. So depending on how soon that hits the top of my shoulder, that's going to create a different length again. So geez, even though I came straight across, I'm starting to look like a city skyline. I am not looking like a nice straight line,
So would you come straight across, or would you bricklay them where you wouldn't even have to cut it much to solve that problem?
Bricklaying is one placement strategy. And it is one of the reasons, because the stylist doesn't want to have the bonds or the strands too close to each other, because they're nervous that the strands are going to interlock and tangle up. So they'll separate, and they'll have space in between, and then the row underneath, they'll go in between those spaces. That's what's creating that bricklay pattern. Okay. And they feel like by leaving enough space in between the two rows and leaving enough space in between the strands, they should keep themselves detangled. If you're going to use that placement strategy, it is really vital to make sure that you're taking enough hair per section. One of the big mistakes that happens in the bricklay that I see is that the stylist takes less hair than the bead or the bond or the strand. They take less hair thinking the client has thin hair, and the less hair I put in, the less damaging it'll be. That is immediately going to cause breakage, or it's going to make the strand turn over on itself, creating a spiraled effect, which is going to lead to tangling. Okay. So you really if you're going to do that bricklay pattern, you really got to make sure that you're taking an even section with the strand that you're using to make sure that it stays within natural fall. If you pack up all the strands side by side, the reason why stylists do that is because then you're forced to take an even amount of hair per section, because they're all going side by side, and they're just all going to push each other straight down. They're not going to move sideways and crash into each other and tangle. Whether you use the straight row pattern or you use a brick laid pattern, when you're placing your strands, you have to take into an account how the client is going to wear their hair with their styling, with their personal styling preferences. If you see your client is constantly with her round brush pulling her hair forward in her face, she's always pulling her hair forward, then it would make more sense to do a very soft angle from the front going back. It would not make sense to come straight across because then she's trying to borrow those hairs in the back to pull them forward, but they're not going to be able to come forward because you put them in a straight line placement. The hairs from the front are going to block these hairs from coming forward, and they're going to push back out again. Then she's always going to be struggling pushing her hair forward. If you do a brick lay pattern and you do such a perfect straight brick lay pattern, though that hair is going to tangle because those hairs are going to start pushing forward. They're going to start wrapping into the hairs in front of them, and that's what's going to cause matting and tangling because the client is constantly pushing them. So even with a brick, if you decide to do a brick lay placement, you still have to get some kind of an angle going in your brick lay placement. Okay. Right. The other thing you have to be mindful is how deep of an angle you're going to take. You shouldn't be.
Which you can do with strands.
Which you could do with strands.
The big problems we see with tape is when they don't put the tape parallel and they try to angle the tape and it ends up being a disaster.
That's why I took a breath because generally speaking, stylists will try to take a 45-degree angle. And in theory, on paper, it makes so much sense because there's a natural angle that we take for styling and cutting and volume and creating volume and lift and everything. The problem, especially in tape,
is the tension. It's a huge
problem. Is the tension. If I put this on an angle, as it starts to grow out, all my tension is in the top of that angle. The bottom angle now is in free fall, and it's going to start twisting over on itself. So it's going to cause a lot of stress, and it's going to cause breakage. Yeah. And worse, if it doesn't break, if it stays stuck in there, it's going to create a lot of matting. It's going to create a lot of tangling and a lot of matting. So not taking a perfect 45-degree angle, taking a soft, gentle angle, like a soft, shallow angle, and keeping your rows parallel with each other. Because that's another mistake that I see is somebody will go in and they'll put a straight row on the side here, and then they'll come in on an angle here and they'll be creating like a triangular pattern.
Right.
But it looks good when it's freshly installed. When it starts growing out, everything is in free fall. You don't have the natural shape of the skull keeping everything in place anymore. Now, as it grows out, it's in free hang, it's in free fall. That natural fall, chaos, absolute utter chaos. Everything is going to start pushing. That angled is going to push that straight line forward. That straight line is going to mess up the style. The client is going to work harder to style their hair, to make the hair lay nicely. It's going to create more tension, more pulling, more stress. It's going to lead to breakage and thinning of that section. It's going to create more shedding. It's just nothing but problems. Because of that over styling, it's going to destroy the hair extension, shortening the life cycle of that hair extension. So if you're telling your client, yeah, we're going to do this, it's going to last 3 to 4 months or 4 to 6 months or 6 months to a year, whatever you tell your client, but because of that placement was put in incorrectly, it's going to shorten the life cycle of that hair extension. Now you're only getting 2-3 months. Now it sounds like you overpromised. Even though you said the right thing, it sounds like you've overpromised. Now it's a customer service issue. What do? You told the client it's going to last this long. It didn't. How are you going to explain to the client they overdid their hair and they beat up their hair too much?
Right. And worse is if it actually affects their natural hair. Then when you remove, you start to create bald spots. Then when you remove the extensions, it looks even worse. Then you got a real problem on your hands. That's where extensions sometimes get a bad rap. It's the installation, the quality of the hair, all of that you got to take into account.
This past weekend was a really stacked weekend. I taught hair extensions 4 days in a row. Friday, Saturday, through 5 days. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Yeah, I taught hair extensions 5 days in a row this past weekend. One of the main things, like you're talking about, why hair extensions gets that bad rap, especially with placement. Okay, we talked about placement and how it's going to fall. But when you are physically placing it to the head, to that section, I mentioned about taking enough hair to be even with the strand. Natural fall is so vital. Is so vital. I see so many stylists pull the hair out straight off the head, or they pull it off on an angle. Or I see when they're trying to place it onto the head, their hands are all over the place because they're not following natural fall and keeping their hand resting on the head to keep their hand steady. So when you're in free fall, I call it, because you're not following natural fall, you're coming off the head at whatever angle. You're creating this, what we refer to as a waterfall effect.
Right.
The hair extension is coming off the head and then it's falling down. And when it creates that angle, there is a stress point right there. As it starts to grow out, that stress point is where the breakage occurs. And then you hear things like clients say, oh, how many weeks do I have to do my rest period in between getting my next set of hair extensions? And that rest period that they're referring to is there is so much breakage of their natural hair that there isn't enough length to attach new hair extensions to it. That is the worst scenario to ever find yourself in. The whole purpose of hair extensions is to create length, volume, and fullness. Okay? The three things that hair extensions do, 2 of the 3 is volume and fullness, thickening the hair, making more hair. We focus so much on length, and that is only 1/3 of what the purpose of hair extensions are. So imagine if 2/3, if the majority of the purpose of hair extensions is to create more hair, more volume, more thickness, more fullness, and you are cracking off and breaking all the natural hair to the point where she had a nice full head of hair. Now she has to walk around looking like this weird crack-ash, pixie cut shag looking thing. And then all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, she's going to have a nice full head of hair again. Could you not look any faker? Can you not look any more goofier? Like, could that not be a telltale sign of something ain't right here? We need to change something in our strategy, and that all comes with following natural fall. When you are placing that, I don't care if it's a weft, if it's a tape, if it's a strand, I don't care what kind of strand it is. Even if you're just going to simply clip in for fun for the day, one of those Barrette clip fun hair extensions, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're not following natural fall, you are causing stress and tension, okay? And equally so, this is where the popularity of the volumizers are coming in, and the hair enhancers are coming in. When we're because all this hair around here is getting beat up so bad and it's breaking so bad, it's so thin. And then if the client has a shedding problem because of age, because of medication, because of whatever, now they have no hair on the top and it's all broken on the sides. So much more. This is why it becomes vital to learn about enhancers and volumizers, for getting full coverage on the top of the head, equally to the sides of the head with your wefts and your strands, So that's really the secrets. That's really the pro advice for your placement. There is a lot going on. Doing hair extensions looks so easy when you see a video. You know, when you see these social media reels, these 1 minute quick things, it looks so simple. You know, oh yeah, you just put it right here, you go around the head, pop it in, and you're done, and you got instantly hair. But there is so much strategy involved. There is so much more involved to thinking about. This is why we say the education is so important. This is why we have the collection of segmented videos on our Profitable Stylist Academy. When you take a course, it's not one 20-minute video. It is specific lengths of video. One could be 5 minutes long, one could be 10 minutes long, one could be 2 minutes long, the next one could be 15 minutes long. They are purposefully segmented in chapters to go over each one of these key factors that is involved when you're going to create your pattern of where you're going to put your hair extensions, and then your actual placement when you're actually going to install your hair extensions. So definitely use the Profitable Stylist Academy website as your educational source and your comeback to review. Okay, those videos, that modules, when you get your education modules, it is yours. You can look at it on your phone, you could look at it on your tablet, you could look at it on your computer. I mean, if you got a smart TV that you could browse the internet on nowadays, I mean, hell, you could even have a TV at the salon, and you have it on your big screen. You could watch it from the comfort of there too. Or if you're good with technology, send it from your phone, Bluetooth it to your TV, you know, and then get a mannequin head. I can't stress enough the importance of practice, right? You watch sports, RJ, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. How long is a game? Like when you watch a game on Sunday, how long is the game generally?
3 5-minute rounds.
3 5-minute rounds, right? How many hours of practice are they putting in a week?
Countless.
They are training for hundreds of hours a week,
right,
just to be prepared for a 3 to 5 minute round. And then they go like what, 5 rounds, 10 rounds?
3 rounds, 5 minutes.
3 rounds, 5 minutes each.
The fight's 15 minutes.
Okay.
Practice for hours, years. You know, the saying is the fight's won before the fight.
Imagine. So this is, to us, when you have a mannequin head, getting good with your placement, following natural fall, getting good with your pattern, making sure your strategy is sound, and getting those two committed to muscle memory. I've said this before on these lives. You don't know what frame of mind you're gonna be in. You don't know what level of stress you're gonna be in that day when the client comes in. You don't know how tired you're gonna be. You don't know how amped up you're gonna be. Maybe you just freshly had a cup of coffee and now you're on your stimulant, you know, or maybe you're dragging. It's time for that cup of coffee, you know.
Right.
Maybe the kids pissed you off, your boyfriend, your husband, your girlfriend, whatever, somebody stressed you out. You got bills to pay. Something else is on your mind. Something's happening in the world that's got you not feeling good. You're hungover. Maybe you had a good, fun time last night, you know, but your hands will always remember what to do. Your body will react in that moment quicker than your mind will. And we were talking about this earlier before we went live, you know, being in that heightened state of adrenaline. That's where the training is so vital. Like you said, the fight is won before the fight even started. All that practice commits that to muscle memory. Your body knows naturally what to do, where to stand, and how to follow natural fall, and where to put the hair before your brain can even calculate and register what's happening.
Right. Yeah, my favorite expression about practicing is winners practice till they get it right. Champions practice till they can't get it wrong.
Nice. That's an awesome expression. Say that one more time. That is awesome.
So winners practice until they get it right. Champions practice till they can't get it wrong.
Rewind this and re-listen to him say that 2,000 times, okay? Until that is burned to memory. Such a great saying. Such a great way to end it. So you want to
Perfect.
sign us off, or you want me to sign us off?
You take it away.
As always, we always appreciate all of you watching.
Don't
Leave us a
forget to
comment.
like, subscribe, stuff Bernard usually reminds you of. Comment, like, and subscribe.
Comment, like, share, subscribe, right? Sign up
There
for
you
more.
go.
And again, it's in the description of the video. Go to the description of this video, profitablestylistacademy.com. It is such an important, vital resource that you are not taking advantage of if you haven't already. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you next week.